What makes a classic? And which books that we read today could be classics in 50, 100, 200 years time? I saw this question over at Jack Edwards and I absolutely love it. As a lover of both the classics as well as modern contemporary fiction, I absolutely adore this question. So, credits where credits due, I'll link Jack's video down below in the description, as well as any books I talk about today. Few quick rules for today. I'm only going to talk about books that were published after 1990, just to keep it modern and fresh, and I'm only going to talk about prose. Although I may slip in a few different categories at the end of the video, so do keep watching. What are tomorrow's classics? And yes, the first book I am absolutely nominating as a future classic is, of course, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. It is no secret that this is one of my absolute all-time favorite books, and I do think that this is one of those books that people will still talk about in 100 years' time. And no, this is not just a TikTok book. This book is older than you think. First published in '92, The Secret History is one of those books that keeps resurfacing. It proved to be the spark that created the dark academia movement and kept on influencing many books that came after it. It is dark, it is gloomy, and it is an excellent portrait of an entitled class which is out of touch with the outside world and is bent for destruction. In its way, it is the Gatsby of the 90s, and I am absolutely confident that we will still be talking and reading about The Secret History by Donna Tartt in 100 years' time. So, first one up, The Secret History. As a second book, I would absolutely pitch The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. Yes, you could say it is historical fiction and it is about book burning in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, but is it really? For me, this is a book about history repeating itself, and it absolutely captures the cultural spirit that we fight against today. It is about cancel culture, it is about book burning, it is about trying to ban books and control what people are reading. It is 1984 all over again, but hidden in an historical fiction story. The book itself is superbly written. Zusak is a masterful storyteller, and this story is one of those stories that will keep on being a reminder and a warning for times to come. It is a favorite among readers, so why not make this our second future classic for today, The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. Third one up, and if there is one book that in the future people will say this book really captures how life and experience of life must have been in the years 2000, then this is going to be it. It is going to be A Little Life by Hanya, Yanagihara. If you have read this book, you know what I'm talking about. It is a book about finding your place in an ever more complicated world. It is a book about mental health, about finding your identity, finding your sexuality. It is a book about trying to be yourself in a complex world. For me, A Little Life is all about the struggle and the trauma that many people go through today. And this is one of the books that I think people will quote to illustrate how life for many individuals and many minorities today was. For me, it perfectly catches the times we're living, and I wish it didn't. Already an absolute classic, A Little Life by Hanya, Yanagihara. Number 4 for me has to be Disgrace by Coetzee. Now, Disgrace is a book about South Africa post-apartheid. It is about a man, our main character, a writer, who finds it difficult to adapt to a whole new world. A world with new sensitivities, with new boundaries, with new rules that he simply doesn't get. And in this new, ever-changing world there are many problems. Problems with toxic masculinity, male violence, problems with not understanding new boundaries, new sensitivities that people might have. We see our main character fail and disgrace himself. It is a story of personal shame and not feeling any empathy, any regret of one's actions. In this way, Disgrace always reminded me of Nabokov's Lolita, but it is so much more than that. In a larger context, it is a token book for all of the struggles that society deals with today. It is a book about a rapidly changing world and people left behind not being able to fathom why their behavior is no longer excusable. Disgrace is a powerful book that seems to keep on adapting itself to modern times. And perhaps in 100 years' time, this book will still be one of those books that captured our way of life and our way of thinking ever so well. So, by all means, for me, a future classic is Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. Now, if authors like Joyce and Kafka have taught us anything, that is when life becomes very complex, literature becomes very strange. And today is no different, so let's talk about Murakami. First of all, I think that if we look at classics in the future, and I sincerely hope I'm right here, it will be much more multicultural than when we talk about classics today. I truly hope that classics can break the American, European, Russian boundaries and just spread all over the literary world. Which brings us into the East and which brings us to Murakami. Now, personally, I am not a big fan of Murakami. I think he has his problems, there is his strange relationship with the women he writes about, there is his ability to lose himself and go completely off the rails, but still he is a very significant author of our times. And in today's war-ridden, strangely complicated world we live in, Murakami might well be the Kafka of this time. So if he is, which book is going to be an absolute classic? Well, if I have to pitch one, it would be the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. It is Joyce, it is Kafka, and it is something totally different. The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle is a strange, almost juxtaposition between something dark and menacing and the shadow of war hanging over it on one side, and very strange comedy on the other side. And even if I'm not a big Murakami fan, I have to admit that the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle is a literary masterpiece. If there is one literary genre that, for me, absolutely describes the world we're living today, then it is this kind of magical realism. And within that genre, Murakami is one of its master storytellers. The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Murakami, it absolutely has to be a classic, right? Now, when I was making this list of books that I think describe the world we live in today, well, it did feel a bit depressing, to be honest. But there is one book I think that offers some hope. One book that says, yes, life can and will be difficult, but if you persevere, if you believe in yourself, well, then you can do whatever you want. And that book, and you know this one, is The Life of Pi by Yann Martel. Yes, you can absolutely see The Life of Pi as a fantastical adventure story, but it is so much more. In its way, it is a cure, a lesson against fear, anxiety, depression, and bad mental health. Conditions and diseases that have never been more prevalent than today. In an age where the highest number of people say that they have never felt so lonely as today, The Life of Pi is very relatable. A lot of people today are floating all alone on an ocean they have to overcome. But this book also reminds us that we all need something to believe in. Whether it is a belief in a religion, whether it is in your own ability, in a better world, in humanity, we all need something to cling on to. Let's abandon the excessive reasoning and give space to feeling and emotion and love again. For me, The Life of Pi by Martel captures the way many people feel today. And from that perspective alone, it shall be an absolute classic. The Life of Pi by Martel, because it feels today, even tomorrow. Now, a lot of the books that we consider to be modern classics today deal with sexuality and deal with racism. And alas, I fear that classics in the future will not be much different. So from that perspective, Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson has to be a future classic. It is a book about race, about gender, about culture, about trying to fit in a world that is hopelessly fragmented. Now, I'm always very careful to compare contemporary authors with classical authors, but in this case I might go on a limb and say that Caleb Azumah Nelson with Open Water has written the Giovanni's Room of our times. This book is needed today, this book is essential today, and everyone should read it. It is Romeo and Juliet, it is Giovanni's Room, it is Beale Street. It feels like so many books I know and love. So yes, Absolutely. One of the future classics, the very recent Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. Now, in the wake of history and the wake of all of the wars and troubles that we've seen over the last few decades and even are seeing today as I record this video, I think that one of the absolute classics in the future will be a book about all of these wars. And there are a few very good ones. Now, at first I thought I would nominate The Kite Runner by Hosseini, but in the end I decided to go for a young adult coming-of-age novel. It is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu, and it has absolutely destroyed me. Yes, this is a young adult novel, but that shouldn't get in the way of it being a classic. The author Zulfa Katu describes this book as a love letter to Syria and its people. Yes, it is about Syria, but it could be about so many places in the world right now. The book itself is all about humanity in circumstances that are absolutely inhumane. It is about survival, it is about trauma, it is about the absolute horrific nature of war and conflict and what it does to its people. But it is also about hope and love and how they can, in the end, hopefully save us. If you have never read this book before, by all means go out, buy a copy, but do be warned. This book, even although it is a YA, will absolutely destroy you. And do check your trigger warnings because it can actually cause some emotional damage. But do not let that deter you. This book feels very today. This book feels very significant. And this book feels, in the end, very hopeful. It is a book about many countries today. It is a book about many people today. It is a book about many areas today. It is a book about war and how it affects the everyday life of normal people like you and me. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. And then my last book for this list, I will admit, is more a bit of wishful thinking from my part. It is the only non-fiction book in this list, although I think it should be an absolute classic. If there is one book, for me, that captures the struggle of being a woman, even today, then it is this one. Why Women Grow, Stories of Soil, Sisterhood and Survival by Alice Vincent. In this book, Alice Vincent, the author, talks and interviews a whole series of women. Women of different age, background, education, culture, and even experience. Each interview, each personal story is a spotlight on an aspect of womanhood today. And yes, again, it is a book about struggle, about trauma, about trying to find your place in a world that might still tend to reject you. It was my absolute favorite non-fiction book of last year, and now that the paperback is out, I will still keep recommending this one to as many people as I can. Yes, these are some of my nominations for future classics. Books that people will still talk about 50, 100, many years from now. But I also think that the novel as we know it today might not be the only form of literature that people will talk about. I think that we will have to admit, whether you like it or not, that the graphic novel might have earned its place as well. Now, I'm not going to review all of these because that will make another video in itself, but I'm thinking about graphic novels like Persepolis, Genderqueer, The Arrival, All Boys Are in Blue. Well, those are going to be graphic novels that people will talk about in many years to come from now. But that is just my opinion, and now I want to hear yours. What do you think that might make a future classic? Which contemporary book will people be talking about in many years to come? Let me know down below in the comments and we'll talk future classics some more. As always, thank you for watching. Do leave a like, do subscribe. And if you want to have some more modern classics in your life, well, then that's easy. All you have to do is watch this video.